Yeah. Yeah. Do we have here a step stool, a ladder, the door? Step stool, no. But there's generally donated. There's a ladder in the. Is Trunk of Bible here today?
What?
Trunk of Bible.
I don't know. I didn't. He wasn't in Minyan this morning.
No.
He wasn't at this Minyan. Let's put it that way.
He asked me to bring him. I had told him I had another Gemara. He asked me to bring it in, which I did. And he's not here to use it either.
Well, sometimes we have. I don't have to tell you, we have health issues that.
I don't know. Things happen. You never know.
Yeah, that's true. Mensch tracht und Gott lacht. Right?
Also wenn man so gesagt, soll man sagen, wir sind und stark.
Ja.
Right?
Even if you're not stark, when we're saying it's
Right?
not everybody can be stark.
That's true. Okay, I'm going to start in a moment with the learning sponsors. And then we'll go a little show and tell. And then we'll go into the Gemara today.
Show and tell.
Yeah. Okay. Learning sponsors.
Is it sneezing?
It's very sneistic.
Okay.
The year of learning, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren of Toby Paris. Saratova Bad Yisrael Dov in her memory. Friends of Nina Monester, Nechama Asna Bad Yitzchak Aharon. Many friends of Stephen Vigdor, Lezecha Nishmat Simcha Melech Ben Meir Leib Halevi. Friends of Marcy Kurtz in memory of her great niece, Leah Bracha Bas Rivka. Isaac and Evelyn Blachor in memory of his sister, Chaya Rachel Bas Isser. A month of learning by Melon Haran Haller in memory of his brother Yaakov ben Abraham. Jill and Perry Meltzer in memory of Jill's mother, Bela Bas Avraham, and Perry's father, David ben Fishel Halevi. Mark Linder in memory of his mother, Yona Bat Zalman Leib. Rabbi Isaac Schmerler in memory of his wife, Menasima Bat Yitzchak. Friends of Marilyn Schmerler in memory of Menasima Bat Yitzchak. Week of Learning by Judy Iger in memory of her father-in-law, Shlomo Michal ben Aharon. Sid Paris in memory of his wife, Saratova Bat Yisrael Dov. Jack Gilman in memory of his mother, Elka Bat Yeshayahu. We have a day of learning today by Judith and Michael Poretsky in memory of her sister, Guta Esther Bat Yaakov Yitzchak. Also a request for Refuah Shlema for Peretz Simach ben Yaakov Yitzchak. And Shemas have an Aliyah, Crank Rafia Velta Yeshua Shemat Leah, and the Chol B'nai Yisrael, good Gebench Yahweh.
Amen.
All right. So, let's see. Okay, so I mentioned yesterday that on Amud Beis, okay, Rashi had a explanation. Okay.
We're running late today, Angela.
Right, and which was unique in the fact that he makes a historical reference. Okay, and I suggested you could look at that Rashi on your own. Okay, but I said, just to give you an example, that that I had a poster at home that I used to keep in my office. Okay, which where's Ted? Ted was one of the ones that was interested. So I brought it along today just to show. Okay, so this is the show and tell. This poster, it's a few years old, but the material it deals with is even older. Okay, so what I'm going to try to do real quick All right, we'll do it like this. I'm gonna put this way, assuming that will stay. All right. And this was a poster that was put out by the Museum of the Diaspora, okay, in Israel and Tel Aviv, okay, called the Sea of Halacha, the map of oral law. Okay. And basically, okay, as I say, I didn't realize it was torn. I would have taped it. Okay, but it starts off, okay, just basically with written law, okay, Har Sinai, and then traces it through with the historical dates, the Zugot, okay, the Pharisees, the various, right? Then Yerushalayim, Tanaim, Yavna and its sages, the Mishnah, oral law. One is, of course, the Babylonian, the Bavli. One is the Yerushalmi, into the Sea of Halacha, Svarim, Gaonim, all the way down. Okay, worms, codifiers, Mons, Krakow, Slobodka, Warsaw, Tells, okay, all the way. So this was an attempt, Shulchan Aruch, you can see is over here. Okay, it was an attempt to give a visual picture, okay, of what the process, if you will, of halacha, okay, so that people would see that there is both a Masorah and a historical.
What is the geographical connection? There are no real geographical.
Well, there is, because you go from Har Sinai all the way to Yerushalayim, then it shows where the Sanhedrin moved to various places. Yavne v'Chachameha, Shefarim,
But Har
Sipori.
Sinai was not necessarily, we don't know where Har Sinai is.
That we'll talk another time.
Okay.
Okay, all right, Tveria, Jerusalem Talmud, okay, Pampadita, Surah, Matamachasia, okay,
Wherever the Jews were chased.
Savoraim, all right, all the way through. Okay,
America.
well,
Not through America.
yeah.
Nothing in America.
Here, Boston, USA, after the Holocaust. That's a reference to, right? And New York, Cleveland, New York, Mir, Brent, okay? So in other words, it brings it up almost to contemporary times to tell us that, okay, and then on the second side, of course, it had a whole list of who the various chachamim were and things like that.
I just want to tell you that we're running very late.
Okay, but all I wanted you to see that,
Okay,
as we said,
I
that
will go there, but I'm going
since
to be
we
late.
came across, even though we didn't read it inside,
All right,
this reference of Rashi's.
don't look for me inside of the outside. Bye-bye.
Okay, so I wanted to use that. Okay. Right, as a jumping off point. For today's, a little bit for today's Gemara. Okay, so what happens from today's Gemara? First of all, on the bottom where we stopped was the bottom of Kaf Aleph Amud Beis, right? We had the place 3 lines up from the bottom. Amar Rebbe Abba Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Okay, Shlosha Sheyashvu Lekayem et Hamshtar. Okay, so and we said V'kara Ar al Achad Mehem. Somebody challenges one of the judges. Ad Shelo Chatmu. But so long as it was up till the time before they signed to certify. Right? Me'idim alav, the other judges can testify about his validity or his suitability. Let's use that word for the moment, okay? V'chotem, and he can sign. Mishechatmu, if they've signed already, ein me'idim alav. They cannot testify about him. V'chotem, and sign. Demai. So that's where we stop. What kind of a challenge was raised about that judge? Okay. Now, the reason I brought all of this in, okay, is because are we going to talk about the judge's, let's say, competence in halacha? Is that going to be the challenge that they're going to raise? Or are they going to raise a challenge about his moral and ethical standards?
Moral and ethical.
Okay, so that's why I want us to where I wanted us to pick up. But this kind of a historical presentation, okay, tries to keep in mind that there is this, let's say, I'm going to call it for the moment, tension that the Gemara is suggesting here between are we only concerned with one aspect of life or the broader picture? Okay, and I'll refer to that shortly. If there was a question that they challenged him because of some act of thievery, of robbery, okay, now we go over to today's daf. All right, Kaf Bet, right? Right, Treva Trainin who. Then you have 2 versus 2. You have the 2 people who are witnesses who brought the challenge, and you have the other 2 judges that are defending him or saying he's suitable. So that's the case of 2 versus 2, right? However, says the Gemara, de pagam mishpacha, if you're going to say that there is some sort of family lineage problem, maybe he was out way back at some point, his possible Canaanite slave lineage. That's what Corinth suggested. I'm not sure. Archville had the same thing. Okay, so what happens? Galui milta ba'almahu. That would be something known. People would know what his family history. Okay, so notice the challenge here is nothing to do with his academic, or so let's say intellectual, okay, or things like that. It has to do with his either his family or his personal moral, ethical behavior. Okay, so what happens? The Gemara now continues, right? And we pick up. Le'olam emelach de gazlanuta. I would say, however, that the challenge was based on some situation of thievery, robbery. And I don't think the Gemara is saying that, he's an outright thief that sneaks into somebody's house. Okay, maybe it's an issue of fraud. Maybe it's an issue of business relations, that he wasn't 100% that kind of white collar crime. That's another story. Uka amrehani, and as these are saying, yad'inan bey the avad tshuva. Okay, and these other judges can therefore claim that no, he did tshuva. If there was any kind of incident, okay, business-wise or things like that. Okay, remember they were not paid. The judges, they had to work for a living, the dayanim. Okay, that's the case. Okay, now we move on. Okay, Amar Rabbi Zera ha milta mi Rabbi Abba Shamili. Says Rabbi Zera, this thing I heard from Rabbi, okay, Abba, all right, and I learned it from him. Ve'ilav Rabbi Abba damin ako shechachta. And were it not that Rabbi Abba had, so to speak, spoken about it, I would have forgotten it. Shlosha sheyashvu lekayem et hashtar. 3 judges, right, that are gathered meeting to certify a document. Umeit echad mehem, and one of them in the interim between the time, okay, that the document was signed, or perhaps, okay, or witnesses came, all right, to
During
bring
the
it.
process,
And
before
then
the end
other-
of the process.
But the fact is the document has not been certified
That's right.
yet, okay, and one of the judges dies. Tzrichin lemichtav, okay, b'motav tlata havina v'chad lituhe. Okay, they have to write then on the, as
Star.
part of the certification, on the star, they have to write, all right, namely that we're in a sense amending, okay, if I can use that word in quotes, as a group of 3, we sat and one is no longer. They have to say that. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, ve'ikatav be shtara denan nafek lekadmana beidina. And if what's written on it, okay, the following, shtara denan, okay, this document that was before us, okay, nafak lekadma beidina, came before this Beit Din. Okay, 2 lo tzarich. Okay, no, more than that is not necessary to be written on the document, namely that it came before a valid Beit Din. Okay, and the assumption then is that there were 3 valid judges to certify the document.
You have to have the 3 signatures.
I would say yes. Okay. Right.
Just sitting and listening to everything, to all the evidence is not enough.
Well, no, we're saying they're coming to certify a document. Okay, so in other words, I bring a bill of debt that Ruvain owes me 100 mana.
Yeah.
Okay, and I bring it before you and Ted and Erwin. Okay, you're the Basin. Okay, and I had Marty and Bob sign that document. So the 3 of you are each there to certify that their signatures are valid signatures. Because either you know their signature, or because you have another source that has their signatures on it and you compare it. Okay, so each one of you are then indicating, yes, that is those 2 witnesses are valid witnesses that then support the validity of that document.
And I'm asking, suppose you go through this whole process,
Yeah.
and everything you find out is valid, and you're ready to sign it, and just before you sign it, one of them has a heart attack and dies.
That's what the Gemara is saying. That's what the Gemara is saying. So the Gemara is, so one, he said you had to write such and such on the document.
And that was to imply that 2 are signing, but really there was 3 initially.
But the other language, what he says is no.
No,
He says
everybody knows initially there was a
it was initially a valid based in looking at. That's the point. Okay. Vidilma based, so the Gemara asks, Vidilma based in Chatzufhu. Okay, maybe it's a arrogant or an insolent based in. Okay, who could Shmuel, as indicated by Shmuel, the Amar Shmuel, as Shmuel once said, Shnayim Shadanu Dinehem Din, 2 who carried out a court decision, Ele Shenikra Beit Din Chatzuf. Rather, this is called a chutzpahdik, an insolent, arrogant Beis Din, when it's two and not three. Okay? Dichtiv, why? Be, because it's written with regard to him, Beidina de Rabbana Ashi, as was indicated in the practice of the Beis Din of Rabbeinu Rabbi Ashi. Okay? V'dilma Rabbanan debe Rav Ashi kiddush Shmuel sevira laho, and perhaps it was the rabbis of the academy of Rav Ashi were of the same view of, like Shmuel, that a court of two was an insolent court and really insufficient Beis Din. Okay, Dichtiv Bey. Why? Because it was written Va'amar Lana Rabbana Ashi. Why? Because it said, such was said by Rav Ashi. Yes. There are situations where they could rule 2-1.
Why not?
Sure.
No, not a court of two.
No,
Can't a court of two, but you could have court of three, could rule 2-1. Sure. Okay. All right. New Mishnah. All right. Ha'isha she'amra, says this woman. Ish eshed ish hayiti ugrusha ani. I was a married woman. I'm divorced. Ne'emenet, she's believed. Why, says the Mishnah? Shehapesha asar hu hapesha hitir. That the mouth that forbids is the mouth that permits. Right? Gemara is going to go into this in a lot more detail. V'im yesh edim shahaita eshed ish. If there were witnesses who say that she was a married woman, v'hi omeret grusha ani, and she claims she's a divorcee. Okay, what happens? Eina ne'emenet. She's not believed. Why? Because you have 2 against 1. Right? Amra, says the what if now another case, says the Mishnah. Nishbeiti utohara'ani. She says, I was held captive, but I am pure. Ne'emenet, she is believed. Why? Shehapesha asahu hapesha hitir. That the mouth that forbids is the mouth that permits. Namely, what happens is the Gemara at the Mishnah, v'im yesh edim shenishbeit. If there are witnesses that come and say that she was held captive, v'hi omeret tahora ani, but she claims she is tahora, einan ne'emenet. She is not believed. Right? Now, v'im, and says here we have to understand, if the witnesses came after she was married, im misheni seit, that's when the witnesses came. After she was already married, ba'uedim, that's when the witnesses came, hare zo lo teitzei. Then the Beis Din does not require her to leave that husband. Okay, and by the way, that applies even if she were to be married to a Kohen. Okay, Gemara, Amar Rav Asi, says Rav Asi, minayin lahapesha asar hu hapesha hitir. What's our basis for the principle, the mouth that forbids is also the mouth that permits? Min haTorah, he claims, Rav Asi. Shana Amar, as we have the following sentence. The father says, Et biti natati leish hazeh. Okay, I have given my daughter, comma, so to speak, to this man. When he says leisha, okay, I have given, okay, right? Et biti natati, right? Leisha, when he says to ish, to a man, asra, she becomes forbidden to all other men because he's been Mekadesh her. Okay. Hazeh, to this man, okay, hitira, okay, that permits him. Namely, she is permitted to that man as her, let's say, husband, but forbidden to all other men. Okay. So that's the basis that Rav Asi claims that hapesha sar shepesha hitir is based on deoraita.
If he never says La'ish Hazeh, then she's can never get married.
Exactly.
That's right.
She's forbidden to all
If she
men.
just said, I gave her to somebody,
And then he
Whoop.
doesn't.
Is
That's
it?
it. Tough
That's
luck.
it. Tough luck, right? Okay. So the Gemara now says, Lama likra. Why did he have to base it on a pasuk, right? Svarahi. This could be based on svara, on logic, right? Hu asra, v'hu sharila. He prohibited her and he permitted her. Ala ki itztarich kra. So therefore, says the Gemara, rather, why do we then need the use of a pasuk? L'kederav huna, to follow, to deal with the example of Rav Huna. Amar Rav, in the name, who said in the name of Rav. The Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. Minayin la'av, shene'aman le'asor et bito min haTorah. How do we know that it is acceptable for a father, okay, to prohibit his daughter based on the Torah? As it says, shene'amar, et biti natati la'ish. I have given my daughter to a man, right? Hazeh, right? Lamali, why do we need it then? Mibaye le l'kidatani Rabbi Yonah. We also need it for what was taught by Rabbi Yonah. Tatani Rabbi Yonah, who teaches, et biti natati la'ish hazeh. I've given my daughter to this man. Hazeh, to this, v'lo li'abam, and not to the brother-in-law or somebody else. Okay? So they both basically darshan the same pasuk, and they both base it on the explanation that Torah requirement, that this is what gives us the fact that she is prohibited, then permitted, and that's what tells us the origin of that concept. Okay? All right, let's go on with the new Braita. Tana Rabbanan, says the Braita. Ha'isha she'amra. What happens? The woman says in this case, right? Now, right? Eshet ishani v'chazra v'amra pnuya'ani. First she says, I'm a married woman, and then comes back and says, I'm single. Ne'emenet, she's believed. V'hashav yuha lenafsha chaticha de'isura, says the Gemara. But here her statement establishes her like a, excuse the expression, like a piece of prohibited meat. Okay? She is not permitted to anybody if she says she's an Eshet Ish. She makes herself like that. Amar Rabba bar Rav Huna. He says in the name of Rav Huna, Kagon shenatna amtala l'divareha, because she has given a rationale or a plausible reason to her words. And we have a Braita, Tanya Nami Hachi, and a Braita teaches this as well. Amra, she says, Eshet Ishani, v'chazra v'amra pnuya'ani. She says, I'm a married woman, and then comes back and says, I'm single. Einane amenet, says the Braita. She's not believed. Ve'im natna amtala or amatla. Okay, right? If she gave a rationale, a reason, l'dvareha ne'emenet, then she's believed. And so we now have a maaseh. And remember, we've always said, when the Gemara cites a real maaseh, it's to support what the halachic statement is or what the derivative of the text says, right? Umaaseh nami bi'isha achat gedola. And there was an incident with a very, this does not mean her size, the woman. Okay, chashuv, exactly, moving. Okay, important status, a woman of society, right? Shahaita gedola benoi, and she was also very beautiful. Notice the Gemara throws that in, right? V'kaftzu aleha b'nei adam l'kadsha, and many men were jumping at the chance, okay, to engage, become betrothed to her. V'amra lahem, and she said to them, mikudeshetani, She said, I'm betrothed. Liyamim, days later, Amda v'kitsha et atzma. Later, many days, she went ahead and she betrothed herself to some other man. Amru lachachamim, mara'it la'asot came. So the sages asked her, what was the reason that you did this? Amra lehem. She said to them, bitchila, earlier, originally, shaba'u alai anashim she'inam mehuganim. Came to me men that were not appropriate. We use that term. Okay, but mehuganim here really means a much stronger. They weren't the kind of man morally, intellectually, etc., that I would have been interested in marrying. Amarti mikudeshet I said I was betrothed. Achshav shaba'u alai anashim mehuganim. Now, however, that other men came who were more morally and intellectually appropriate, amarati v'kidashti et atzmi. I then came forward and I betrothed myself to one of them. Okay. V'zo halacha he'ela Rav Acha Sar Habira. And this is the law that was raised, that was presented by Rav Acha, who was the Sar Habira. He was the chief authority of the city. Okay. Like we have you have the Rav of the Kotel, you have the Rav of the old city. In other words, it was an established position of authority. Okay, Lifnei Chachamim Ba'usha, and he presented it in Usha, and that diagram showed that at a time the Beis Din had moved and they were meeting there. Okay, Va'amru, and they said, Im natna amatla l'davareha, if she gives a reasonable, plausible reason, rationale to her words, ne'emenet, she is believed. Ba'minei Shmuel mirav, and Shmuel now asks Rav the following situation. Amra tme'a ani. What happens if she says, I'm tme'a? V'chazra v'amra tahora ani. Mahu. And then she comes back and says, I am Tuhora. What's the status? Amarle. So Rav answers him, Aflazo. Even in that case, Im natna amatla l'davareha ne'emenet. If she gives a valid reason, right, she is believed. So what happens now? Tana mine arba'im zimnin. Shmuel then repeated this lesson 40 times. Okay, he didn't want to forget it. Va'afilu hachi lo avad Shmuel uvda benafshe. And even with that, Shmuel did not use this fact, this situation, for himself. The implication of the Gemara is that a situation occurred where Shmuel's wife said she was tme'ah because she just wasn't physically or emotionally up to having relations. But then afterwards she said to him, I'm tahora. But he didn't utilize that lesson for his own benefit. Let's put it that way. Okay? All right. Is that, did Artsville bring that story too?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay. All right. New Braita. Okay. Tana Rabbanan, says the Braita. Shnayim Omrim mate. Two witnesses come and say, deceased. Ushnayim Omrim lo mate. Excuse me. And two witnesses say the person did not die. I'm assuming we can guess that it may be about a husband.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And whether we
That's
can,
dark.
right? And whether we can say, okay, that
She
they're
can
giving
remarry.
testimony whether she can remarry, right? Or another scenario, says the Braita here, Shnayim Omrim Nitgarsha. Two claim she's been divorced. Ushnayim Omrim Lo Nitgarsha. And two claim she's not divorced. Hare Zo Lo Tinaseh. This woman is not permitted to married. Ve'im niseit, but if she's already married, lo teitzei, we do not force her to leave this husband. Now, Rabbi Menachem Bar Yossi Omer teitzei, he disagrees and says she must leave that husband. Now, what happens? What's his reasoning? Amar Rabbi Menachem Bar Yossi, Matai ani Omer teitzei. At what point do I say she must leave that second husband? Bizman sheba'u edim ve'achar kach niseit. At a situation where the witnesses came, okay? In other words, two sets of witnesses, all right, and they disagree, so their testimony is a safek, okay? That's when I say, and she hadn't married yet, okay? Aval niseit ve'achar kach ba'u edim, but if she already married, and then the two sets of witnesses came,
Then the
2
second
versus
set-
2, and they contradict each
And the
other.
contradiction,
Right?
then she has to go.
Lo
Then she has to
teitzei.
leave.
Lo teitzei.
Okay.
Right? That's the case, because there's an uncertainty. So the Gemara now raises the point. Michte, since trei v'trei ninhu, since we have 2 versus 2, and therefore we have an uncertainty, haba have aleha ba'asham talui kai. The bringing, I'm going to say, ave, excuse me, asham talui, which is brought whenever there's a sefek, shouldn't that be what's done? In other words, the second husband should perhaps bring an asham talui. Okay? Excuse me. Amar Rav Sheshet, says Rav Sheshet, kegon shenis'et lachar le'achad me'edeha. No, the situation was such that she married one of the witnesses
That said her husband died.
that said her husband died. So he's certain. So that's why he doesn't have to bring the Asham Talui. Okay? So the Gemara then says, He gufa ba'asham talui kaima. Maybe she then, it's herself, is the one who has to bring the Asham talui. Okay? Ba'omeret barili, but she has said, it's clear to me that he died. Okay? In other words, what happened? Whatever happened, that's the case. Okay, our new piece again in the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says here, Shnayim omrim mate, ushnayim omrim lo mate. 2 witnesses claim he died, 2 witnesses claim he did not die. Hare zo lo tinaseh, says Rabbi Yochanan, she is not permitted to remarry. Ve'im niseit, and if she does remarry, lo teitzei, she is not required to leave the second husband. Shnayim omrim nitgarsha, 2 say she was divorced. Ushnayim omrim lo nitgarsha, and 2 witnesses, continues Rabbi Yochanan, to say she was not divorced. Hare zo lo tinaseh, says Rabbi Yochanan, lechatchila, she is not to remarry. Ve'im niseit, and if it's b'di'evid, teitzei, nevertheless, she must leave the second husband.
How would you know someone was not divorced? I understand how you know divorce.
How would you know somebody is not
Yeah,
divorced?
how would the witness know someone is not divorced? Were you with them all the time?
Because the husband traveled to Spain, and these 2 other guys happened to see him when they were in Spain on business,
So he could not have
and they
given-
saw him there. I'm just throwing out
Right.
a scenario.
What's the brothers?
Okay, no, Kleiner and the Greuser. Okay, so what happens? They saw him, and then they come back to Bavel and they say, how can you claim that you're divorced when we just saw your husband last week in things like that.
Could have sent the get with the.
That's good to say they were aligned, that he's not an almana, but on divorce, that they have witnesses on the negative.
Okay, they could say we saw him. She claims, no, we said we didn't. No, your husband never said something to us about your being divorced, something like that. Okay, all right. So what happens? So we have two different parts of Rabbi Yochanan's statement. On the one hand, the woman does not have to leave the second husband in the first statement. In the
where they testified about the husband's
death. And in the second statement regarding the divorce, okay, it does say that she has to leave the second husband. Okay, both from Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, that's the right. So what happens? So the Gemara now asks, Ma'ishna Resha, Ma'ishna Sefer. What is the difference between the first statement and what's so unique or different about the second statement?
What's the difference between death and divorce?
Right? Amar Abaye, says Abaye as follows, Tirgama be'ed echad. Interpret Rabbi Yochanan's two statements that we're talking about only one witness. Eid echad omer meit. One witness says he died. Himnuhu Rabbanan kebei trei. And the rabbis believed him as if there were two. Ukide'ula, as with regards to Ula. The Amar Ula, who said as follows, Ko makom shehe'emina Torah eid echad, wherever the Torah establishes the validity of a single witness, Hare kan shnayim. It's as if it were two. Vahai de kamar lo mate. And here, when the one person says he did not die, have lechad. He was only one. Ve'en dvarav shel echad b'makom shnayim. And we don't say that the word of one contradicts the word of two. Okay? Ihachi, if that's the case, continuing regarding Abaye's explanation, afilu lechatchila nami, then that should be the case originally. Mishum de Rabbi Asi, as was indicated by Rabbi Asi. Da Amar Rabbi Asi, who says as follows, okay, citing a pasuk, Haser mimcha akshot peh, lazut sfatayim archek mimcha. Okay, citing, put away from thee I open a front mouth, and perverse lips put far from thee. Okay, namely, Seifa Eid Echad Omer Nitgarsha. In regards to the second statement, excuse me, one witness says he was divorced. Ve'eda, he divorced her. Ve'eda Echad Omer Lo Nitgarsha. And another witness says she's not divorced. Okay, what happens in that case? Travaihu be'eshet ish kimishade. Both of them are ultimately saying that at one point she was married. Okay, they're both testifying she was or is a married woman. The one saying she's not divorced clearly comes right out and saying she's still married. The one who says she was divorced implies at one point she was married. Okay, so that's the point. Vahai de ka'amar, and that which she says, Nitgarsh, the one who says right, Nitgarsha, that she's divorced, Havelei had, that's only one. Ve'en dvarav shel echad b'makom shnayim. And we don't have again here one that contradicts the.
We have one that contradicts
one that
two.
does contradict two, but that it doesn't overrule them.
Right, the one does not overrule the two.
Right. Okay. because ultimately they both said at some point, either now or previously, she was married. Okay, now what happens? So this was all Abaye's explanation. Now we come back. Rava is saying to him as follows: Rava Amar, La'olam Trey v'Trey Ninhu. No, I'm not going to explain it as only one, but it's 2 versus 2. V'ra'a Rabbi Yochanan, dvarav shel Rabbi Menachem bar Yossi b'gerushin. And Rabbi Yochanan saw, and I'm understanding saw here, in other words, accepted, followed the view, okay, of Rabbi Menachem bar Rabbi Yossi regarding the situation of divorce. V'lo ra'a b'mita, but he did not see or accept Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Menachem bar Rabbi Yossi's view in regarding to the issue of death. Ma'itama, what was the reasoning? Mita eina yichola makhashato. With regards to death, there is no way to contradict it. Gerushin yuchala makhashto. With regarding to divorce, it's possible to contradict it. So the Gemara asks, Umi chatzifa kuli hai? Is one so impudent? Okay, could the woman be so right chutzpahdik to do that? V'hama Rav Himnuna, and did not Rav Himnuna tell us the following? Ha'isha she'amra leba'ala girashtani, the woman who says to her husband, you divorce me. Okay, ne'emenet, she's believed. Chazaka ein isha me'iza paneha b'fnei ba'ala, because we have a chazaka, a presumptive halachic status, that a woman is not impudent in front of her husband in the court. Okay?
Therefore, if she did say it, then we believe her.
Hani mili hecha deleka edim. This is a situation where there are no witnesses to come in order to support her. Aval hecha deika edim to come, but where there are witnesses who can support her, ma'iza uma'iza. Indeed, in that situation, the wife may be impudent and challenge the husband and say, okay, that. Rav Asi, okay, however, and some say it should be Rav Ashi. Okay, here, all right. Amar says, Kegon da Amre Edim Achshav Mate. Could be a situation where the witnesses say the husband just died, recently died. Okay?
Today or
right? Achshav Gersha, or he just recently divorced her. Mita Leka Lebrura. Death, okay? There is no need to clarify. Okay, you're going to know for sure whether the man, right? There's publicity.
Right.
There's a cola. There's publicity. People went to the funeral. Okay, Gerushin Ika Lebrura. But where divorce, there is a need to clarify. Okay, Da Amrinam La Im Ita Dahachi, because we can say to her, if this is the case, Hava achze langitech. Come and let us see your bill of divorce. Tanu Rabbanan, and we get to this final braita for today. Says the braita, Shnayim omrim nitkadsha, 2 say she became betrothed. Ushnayim omrim lo nitkadsha, and 2 say she was not betrothed. Hare zo lo tinaseh. This one may not marry. Ve'im niseh, and if she did marry, lo teitzeh, she is not forced to leave that husband. Shnayim omrim mitgarsha, 2 say she was divorced. Ushnayim omrim lo nitgarsha, and two say she's not divorced. Hare zo lo tinaseh. We say she should not marry. Ve'im niseit teitzei. And if she marries, she must leave him. And with tomorrow, tune in as we see why. All right, what's the difference? A long Gemara tomorrow. All right, yeah. Well, we'll do it. Whether it's Rosh Chodesh, all right?
Been no
Okay.
shortage before.
Right? How'd we do time-wise today? We did okay today. We're all right.
We did
Okay.
okay.
Good. All right.